Good evening, and welcome to Football Now with Deacon Himself. I hope everyone had a wonderful and safe Sunday. Has the events of this week and the previews of next week are what we're going to do in today's episode. So we're having a little bit of a longer segment, and I appreciate, as always, everyone who is a follower of Deacon Himself, fan and friend. If you hate Deacon Himself, which I know there are a few of you out there who are watching the podcast that do hate me. Hi, haters. Just want to give a big shout out this week to my man Matty P. One of two shout outs this week. Matty P was with me on Sunday as we watched the New York Football Giants play the Philadelphia Eagles, and what a game it was for the Eagles. Never to say the least. But start off the action, Cleveland Browns hosting the Buffalo Bills last week. I benched Fred Jackson. That mistake will never happen again because he is in my starting lineup this week in fantasy. 2 touchdowns receiving, 1 touchdown on the ground, but the Browns still roll at home. The Browns are contenders. How sickening and scary that is. But the Cleveland Browns are up and coming. Happens to be one of the factors that my man, lead singer of Aqua Cherry, Derek Gross, good friend of mine, and I talk about all the time, is that if a team for years just has the number one draft pick all the time, they really honestly should do something. So let's just say for 4 years in a row you have the number one draft pick and you don't put a team together or a franchise team together, there's something wrong with that situation. But next game, New England went to Cincinnati this week. If you remember last week, that was one of my locks of the week for Cincinnati. I actually, I thought New England would go in there and crush them, but the Cardiac Cats at home are knocking off contenders. They beat Green Bay at home. They beat New England at home. They beat the Steelers at home. They might be the Seattle Seahawks of the East Coast, but 13-3 win over New England. Detroit traveled to Green Bay. I thought we'd see a little bit more out of Detroit with a close game, but a 22-9 ball game in that one, and the Detroit Lions fell. 3 field goals from David Akers was the extent of the defense. Green Bay's defense, maybe they're good. Maybe Detroit had an off game. Clay Matthews out for a month now with a thumb injury. It's a big heart and soul of their defense, but we'll see what happens next week. Seattle went to Indy. That was very shocker week. That was upset alert. 34-28 Indy at home. Andrew Luck got the best of Russell Wilson and Seattle. Going back home this week, where hopefully they'll rebound from that. Baltimore on the road, 26-23. It's a big win for them in Miami. It is big because Miami is an up-and-coming team who is actually now a contender. New Orleans on the road in Chicago proved a lot to me this week that the New Orleans Saints are not a fluke on the road, and they can win away from the Superdome. Big win on the road versus the Bears. Again, bringing it back to my shout-out in the original part of the segment, Matty P and I watched the Philadelphia Eagles just dismantle the New York Giants 36-21. Big game. Vic got 100 yards rushing in the first half, 80 yards in the first quarter. Got hurt, left the game with a hamstring. Foles came in the fourth quarter, had 200 yards passing with 1 touchdown for the nail in the coffin. G-Men, I do know 0-6 is what you're going to be after you lose to the Chicago Bears this week. KC, Tennessee, anticipated game of the week for me. I watched that game. Kansas City 26, Tennessee 17. Tennessee's a contender now, real team. I think that they have a legitimate shot to challenge the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts for the AFC South. I like what they're doing with the offense, and their defense is pretty stellar. If Chris Johnson, the real Chris Johnson, can stand up and actually learn how to follow his blockers, Tennessee could be a dangerous team. Jacksonville, St. Louis. Jacksonville falls again. They are in competition right now with them, the Steelers, and the Giants to see who is going to receive that alleged number 1 draft pick. I don't think any one of these teams really right now deserve it, and I think that the Jacksonville Jaguars are the closest thing to the word deservement for this number 1 draft pick. people will say, like, you don't deserve a draft pick, or you don't, like, teams don't lose on purpose, folks. They don't want to lose on purpose. They just can't help themselves, and they make mental mistakes and things that cause you to lose football games. Two things that win football games: time of possession, points off turnovers, TOP, POT. I told you I'll say it every week. Carolina on the road in Arizona. Arizona 22, Carolina 6. Again, not much to talk about from the desert. Cam Newton and company shut down. D'Angelo Williams on my fantasy team, 8 whopping points this week. I need more from him. Denver, Dallas, shootout, 51-48 Denver. I told you guys last week's segment that there is absolutely no chance that Dallas Cowboys can beat the Denver Broncos. They were the closest team to do so. Hats off to Dallas for playing a great game on the offensive side of the ball. The game was in Dallas. If that game was in Denver and Mile High, the score would be nowhere near what it was. Houston traveled to San Francisco. 34-3. That was a house of a game. San Francisco just destroyed them, start to finish. Colin Kaepernick did not have the big game that I anticipated he would, but Frank Gore did. And hats off to them. Niners, tough game this week. We'll see what happens. San Diego, on the road, in Oakland. Late start last week. San Diego fell 27-17. It's a game that I would prefer not to talk about, as Philip Rivers has 3 consecutive 400-yard games when the Charger offense just shut down against the tough Oakland Raider defense. The Raiders are a decent team. They just happen to not show on the record, and they have another tough division rival this week as they go and play Kansas City. Gangrene. Monday Night Football versus the Atlanta Falcons on the road. Geno Smith and company becoming the second rookie quarterback to ever win a game on the road in Monday Night Football. If you rabid football fans out there can remember, 1987, Ed Rubert, year to strike, Washington Redskins was the only other man to do it. Now into the previewing of this week's games. New York Giants at Chicago. Hands down Chicago. Eli and company just don't have what it takes to finish out the season, and if they win 2 games all season, Giant fans, be happy. 0-6 is coming your way. Philly at Tampa Bay, big game for the Eagles, trying to show whose division it really is. They should dismantle the dismantled enough already Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we'll see what happens from there. Cincinnati at Buffalo. Cincinnati is not in Ohio. They are in Buffalo this week in Ralph Wilson Stadium, Orchard Park, New York, upstate Buffalo. The only real New York team. Buffalo Bills will prevail. Not sure if E.J. Manuel will be playing this week, but we shall see what happens. Detroit at Cleveland. As scary as this to say, I think the Cleveland Browns are going to pull this out, but I could be wrong here. Detroit steps up and shows what they can really do on the offensive side of the ball. And another reason part that they didn't do much last week is because Megatron wasn't playing. He'll be playing this week back in my fantasy lineup. But Megatron, with him in the lineup, Matthew Stafford completes 55% of his passes. Last week with him out of the lineup, 35. It's a 20% difference in the pass difference of completion for the Detroit Lions and Matthew Stafford with Megatron in the lineup. You see what it does for their offense. St. Louis going to Houston. Houston should just run all day over St. Louis. If anything else happens different, I will not be doing a segment next week because I do not know what I'm talking about, and I shouldn't be doing it if the St. Louis Rams walk into Houston and win that game. Oakland on the road in Kansas City. Kansas City remains undefeated. Tough division game. It will be a lot closer than everybody thinks it is. Hats off to Andy Reid and what he's doing this year with Alex Smith, giving him the confidence and the ability to win football games, control the team, and actually be a contender for the first time in many, many years. Carolina at Minnesota. Minnesota APAD should handle 2 tough games on the road for Carolina. First in Arizona, now up north to Minnesota. I don't think Cam Newton and company like playing indoors in Minnesota, but we'll see what happens there, as Minnesota should win that game big. Pittsburgh at the New York Football Jets. Gang green. Win this week. Play New England next week for the division. Potentially, if New England can lose to New Orleans, then we could see a first place tie between the New York Football Jets and the New England Patriots fighting it out for that number one spot in the division next week. But for now, Pittsburgh fans, Giant fans, Jacksonville Jaguar fans, I'm having a poll on here. Email me at cdeacon1198@gmail.com to see which one of them is going to get a win first. But neither one of them three teams that I just mentioned will have a win this week. I promise you that. Jacksonville at Denver. With that being said, 26.5 point spread as of right now. There is absolutely no way that Peyton Manning will not cover that spread. If the spread was 52, I'd take Peyton Manning to crush the Jacksonville Jaguars at home and remain undefeated. Tennessee going to Seattle, my game of the week. I'm definitely anticipated to watch this. Tennessee Titans are playing in Seattle. Let's see if a different Russell Wilson comes out. Didn't play a bad game last week. Had a tip ball at the end of the game. Russell Wilson with the Colts picked that ball off, and that's how they had the drive ended. But they had a legitimate chance at the end of that game to come back and win that game. As I just mentioned, New Orleans on the road in New England. They are going to be welcoming back Rob Gronkowski. Expect a big, big game from Tom Brady. Start him in fantasy if you haven't benched him the last couple of weeks like I thought about doing. But I wrote an email this week to one of my best friends saying, start Tommy. I haven't had a big game all season. Brady this week. He's having one, trust me. Arizona going to San Francisco. I did mention that San Francisco is having a tough game this week. Should handle the Birds at home. It will be a tough game, though. Washington on the road in Dallas. Washington, after what you've seen last week, Dallas give a fight for the knocking off of Peyton Manning's undefeated streak. Dallas at home, unfortunately, they're going to win that game. Monday Nighter, Indy, going to San Diego. My San Diego Chargers need to rebound. They need to rebound after last week's horrendous performance on the road in Oakland, division rival, where they've had 15 of the last 17 games. Now it's 15 of 18. That's still a high percentage if you do the math. I'm not doing it off the top of my head now. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to my man Dexter. He's another big Gang Green fan. Wanted to owe him the shout out. Been catching games together. He's the man. If you need any plumbing and heating done, let me know. Dexter's Plumbing and Heating. He'll help you out. Also, again, I left my email on there. Get at me on Twitter, cdeacon. Also, get at me on email, cdeacon1198. I'm going to open up a new part of the segment this week. It's going to, from the future on now, it's called Stump the Deacon. Send me your picks. If you do 10 or more, I'm a season ticket holder for the New York Rangers. If you beat me with 10 or more correct picks against the games that I picked this week, then you will be coming with me in 8 rows back in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. Rangers aren't looking too good early start, but they're on the West Coast. Henrik hasn't had practice. That's hockey now. For now, this is football now, but we'll talk about that at a different time, different era. Football now with Deacon himself. I'm out, guys. Enjoy the games this